right? Say you're at work and something unfortunate or untoward happens, and you need some legal representation to assert your rights in that situation. Whether a boss mistreated you, you were fired unfairly, uh, or something worse happens. Ben, in the District of Columbia and Northern Virginia, you know who to call, right?
Yeah, you call the Ehrlich Law Office because you have rights.
That's right. And your rights matter. And you deserve to be free from harassment. And you deserve to work. The Ehrlich Law Office handles workplace discrimination. They do civil rights. If you have a wage theft issue, they are there for you. If you have a separation from your employer that you want to get down on paper, and you're dealing with a non-compete clause or something to that effect. If you feel like your civil rights have been violated by a local government, call the Ehrlich Law Office. If you want a free consultation, tell them we sent you. Go to ehrlichlawoffice.com/filibuster. Hey, welcome in. It is a second episode of the Filibuster Podcast this week. DC United's preseason is over, and the regular 2022 season is officially and finally here. United will open up Saturday night on Buzzard Point against expansion side Charlotte FC, whose coach somewhat famously doesn't seem especially optimistic about this early part of their first ever year of play. We will talk about that on this episode because we have Alex Andrejev from the Charlotte Observer on to talk all things Carolina soccer. Alex, welcome to Filibuster.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We're thrilled to have you. We have a tradition here. What are you drinking?
Yes, I was informed of the tradition beforehand. I've got a seltzer here with me for this lovely evening.
Nice.
Love a good sparkling water.
Yeah.
We have to start off with that quote from Miguel Angel Ramirez, who, for anyone who's been under a rock for the last couple weeks, said that after some misses on player acquisitions, some targets fell through, essentially. He said that we're screwed was the, I think, PG translation from Spanish that was posted in the subtitles of that video. So how's the roster going into week one?
Yeah, well, there hasn't been much change, notably, I think, to the roster at that point, which was only a couple, week ago or so, before this latest Charleston tournament that Charlotte FC was playing in. And there haven't been really any other major signings or DP additions. Obviously Miguel's comments came after, a reported deal fell through with Darwin Machis, and that ultimately didn't end up happening after, he was involved in some legal trouble back in Spain that was going to make it difficult for him to sign an MLS contract. And so that Charlotte was not aware of it until late in the process, and ultimately that deal did not get done, which put them in a rough spot leading into, this first game against DC United and then home opener. And even, I think, the first kind of beginning of the season, it's going to take a little bit of time, it sounds like, to get ultimately a major kind of target and acquisition that Charlotte wants to see. We might not see another big name until like a summer transfer window or something like that, potentially. So, and again, I think Miguel's comments were, we're screwed. I don't know if it's necessarily we're screwed for good or just kind of screwed in this moment, right? Like, this isn't what the roster, obviously, I think the front office is working very hard to still get these DP slots filled, get these wingers that they need, more strikers. I mean, now the latest thing that we've heard coming out of the club is Karol Swiderski, who's notably Charlotte's only DP, unless you count, I guess, Jordi Alcivar is considered a young DP right now for kind of roster purposes. But, Karol is going to be, he's back in Poland dealing with some other kind of visa processing issues and might not be back for this first game against DC United. So that does not leave you. And you've got Vinicius Melo, who's another young forward, young striker on this team that is ineligible because of injury. So it's, Charlotte has just had a lot of these kind of deals that they thought have been close, deals that they wanted to get done. Players get injured, players have visa issues with so many international players, and haven't been able to spend really the full preseason together. And then they're coming together kind of right at the start of the season and say, like, what do we have to work with when we look at our front line? And it's not a lot. So that was kind of the context of Miguel's comments.
So my ears perked up early in your answer there, and I'm sure some listeners did too, because you mentioned a preseason tournament in Charleston, which the Carolina Challenge Cup is a long-standing preseason tournament there that DC United went to for a lot of years before the Charleston Battery folded. But it's great to hear that it's back and has MLS teams, and maybe DC United can go in the future, because I've wanted an excuse to go to Charleston for that tournament for years and haven't been able to make it. So hopefully we'll see you there in the coming year.
Yeah, no, that, and I actually wasn't there in person to cover it because it overlapped with the Daytona 500, which is also the other beat that I cover. So, Charlotte is very much a NASCAR city as much as it's becoming this new MLS city. And so that was where I was this past week. And so I actually missed a lot of Charlotte FC's games, but I was still kind of following as much as I could be and trying to keep updated with, was getting sent quotes from players and coaches afterwards, and was back at the stadium today to hear we heard one player, Christian Kalina, who's Charlotte FC goalkeeper, kind of his assessment of what preseason looked like there. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like a good time. I've heard great things about the tournament. So just the atmosphere there. So I'd love to go next season in the future for sure.
The Battery haven't folded, Adam. What are you talking about?
They did. They folded operations for a year or two. They literally disappeared for a time.
And they're back and beat Charlotte.
And they came back. They came back. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I said.
Ben might have a time miss. There's like a scene missing for Ben. It's just like a year.
I mean, nothing matters in the pandemic. especially in D2 and D3 American soccer.
But I think the tournament actually stopped before, and then they folded, and then they came back and brought the tournament back. It was all a thing. It was a whole thing.
So Alex, sticking with Ramirez, he has 3 years of experience being a head coach. He was sacked at his last job pretty quickly. What did the ownership of Charlotte see in him, and why did they bring him in, and what do they expect from him in this first year?
Yeah, well, I mean, the expectations are lofty, I would say. The front office has pretty explicitly said that they want to not just make playoffs the first year, but host a playoff match. So, that is a pretty high standard, I would say, for an MLS expansion team. But Miguel, I think, has also kind of had a history of coming into teams and being able to win with what he's got a little bit. I think Internacional being the Outliers' latest club that he was sacked from. But, he's found success before, just kind of with younger players, especially. I think he's got a ton of academy experience. Is from Las Palmas, Spain originally, coached at Greek academies. And then that 2019 Sudamericana Cup was a real, I think, it was a real kind of like coming out for him a little bit in terms of what he was able to achieve with that team and performance wise, be able to put that team together and take a club that has never really gone as far as that and still be able to succeed with this like young, inexpensive roster by kind of South American team terms. If that makes sense. And that was with Independiente. Sorry, I should clarify that.
Well, so Alex, you mentioned that the team has one DP fell through, another sounds pretty iffy. If he's in Poland currently, and the game it's hard to believe it's coming up. We're recording on Tuesday. It's it's days away. It's probably gonna be iffy that he, even in the best case scenario that he plays. Who else is on the roster that Charlotte is excited about? I know there's been a lot of, the negative side of this, but where are the bright spots right now?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely fair too to talk about those bright spots, because it seems like there are kind of younger guys, or maybe just talent that hasn't necessarily been looked at before, that Charlotte feels like these are going to be really promising international players within MLS. I know Jordi Alcivar is one. TT Ortiz is another guy that I think has been able to kind of capitalize on these goal scoring moments, when he's not been in the best positions necessarily. I mean, I think Anton Walks was a really great kind of pickup by Charlotte in the expansion draft to get him from Atlanta. So that's a little bit of MLS experience kind of to balance that pretty international, never played in MLS before roster that's characterized this team. I think Jalen Lindsay is another guy that is gonna come back and kind of put in a good, he's back in Charlotte and back in his hometown, and he's already had some good minutes within MLS. But I hope that we continue to see him grow at Charlotte and in this game model. And even like some of these kind of college players, I know Miguel has been really excited about. Ben Bender, who was their super draft pick. And then Chris Hagart was another player from Georgetown that Miguel has been really impressed with as a midfielder. And George Marks, who's another, he's a Clemson goalkeeper that was just signed to a contract with Charlotte FC, another super draft pick. But I know he's really impressed that coaching staff just through the course of this preseason. So, I don't know how. I would hesitate to say that Charlotte's going to go out there and like score a million goals, but I think that with especially that back line and midfield that they have assembled, they're gonna still be able to create some opportunities, and hopefully they can add a few more players. I mean, Mackenzie Gaines on the outside as a winger, I know has just been talked about, his like incredible speed that he has. And so we've seen these moments too throughout preseason in Charleston. You can see the promise, I think, with some of these sequences. And now it's just about having the time together to really put it all together.
Well, speaking of the defense, one of the players that Charleston has picked up from DC United is Joseph Mora, involved in a transaction that got DC United some allocation money. What was it, 50K, I believe?
Yeah, the mandatory 50K.
50K,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
How Joseph Mora was a solid fullback when DC United played a 4-4-2. When they switched formations to a three-back, he didn't really fit into Hernan Losada's style of play. What is his role going forward in Charlotte's in Charlotte's style of play? Is he a starter? Is he a backup? How much of a role is he expected to play?
I mean, it's kind of tough to say a little bit because all these guys have gotten so many minutes interchangeably, I think, and the starting lineup has been pretty varied. I mean, I know that we've been asking Miguel, certainly, like, what formation do you expect to play for the start of this season? And his response, even against, like, for this DC United match, has been, like, we're going to look at whatever opponent we're playing, and that's how we're going to adjust what formation we play. So it's this kind of, hybrid system, I would say, that literally changes mid-game. Is how that, and that's even how like players will describe it to me too, is, they're like, well, we kind of, we'll shift further up the field, we'll shift further back wherever it's kind of needed. So the roles are somewhat undefined, but it's more about creating space as far as I understand it, like knowing what spatially, where you're supposed to be in cover, and then filling in gaps too that you see. So, I think Joseph Mora being able to kind of, if he's going to slot in kind of a right back or left back position, even not even just, that full back slot, I could see them moving him around somewhat. And whether he's going to be a starter, I think I think we're going to have to see like these first couple of matches, honestly, but I think you can expect him to get playing time still as Miguel and that coaching staff tries to figure out who are going to be the consistent starters. And again, I don't know if they're necessarily, at least early in the season, are going to be consistent starters.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of another point that I would want to make, is just it's very much so seems that he's going to adapt the starting 11 and the starting, and even just, you know, the substitutions he makes to whatever he sees playing out in mid game in the field. I think it's going to be very fluid.
Another former DC United player that landed in Charlotte is Jordi Reyna, who seems at least likely to be in the rotation in that front three.
Yeah, and I mean, Jordi has had, like, he's had some significant minutes too, I think, understandably. And Jordi, I know, like, he had some injuries at DC prior, right? And had some visa issues, so he didn't really get to Charlotte until right before they left for Charleston. But he almost immediately, you know, like, came in and made an impact. You know, I think he's going to be, we can say that he's probably going to be a consistent starter if no others necessarily, because they really do need that, like, attacking fortification right now and power at the wings. So, yeah, I mean, I think if he can kind of slot into that immediately and be probably a little bit more consistent with just some touches in this game model that Miguel has outlined, then you're going to see him have a lot of minutes at Charlotte.
I was curious, earlier you mentioned that, you know, Charlotte is mostly a NASCAR town and is starting to pick up with MLS expansion coming in. What is the general feel for the area with an expansion team coming in? How excited? I know I've seen some of the shots from the Panthers stadium, which is kind of wild to see, to be reminded of what NFL stadiums are like on the inside, as compared to some of the other places around the league. So just a general feel for, you know, how into this team, for lack of a better way to put it, is the city of Charlotte at this point.
Well, they're trending towards a sellout for that home opener, and that's been really the kind of what that front office has been pushing for, is to hype up that home opener, get people excited about having an MLS team in Charlotte. And I think something that's noteworthy about Charlotte as like a sports city is that there's no MLB team here necessarily. So it's, you know, still kind of a growing, slightly smaller city than, you know, your like New York's or LA's, but it's right in that kind of second tier, almost like a Nashville is what I would kind of compare it to right now. Potentially Atlanta, and I know that a lot of comparisons have been drawn between Atlanta and Charlotte building out this expansion club because of the shared stadium with, you know, an NFL team, not having that soccer specific stadium, and just the excitement in the Carolinas about soccer in general, and this being like a breeding ground for USL teams and youth academies and, you know, women's soccer too. So I think having that pull and draw, and there's certainly an interest and excitement leading into this home opener. And I think it's just going to be like whether that, you know, sustains. But I think I've certainly seen kind of the fan interest and passion and excitement around it. And so I think it's going to be there. And then, you know, whether the team can kind of produce the results, I think regardless, you're still going to see some hype around it because it's expansion team. They're in their first year. You know, it's a little bit of the honeymoon phase, I think, is I've heard it described and been describing it to others. But yeah, the excitement is there for sure. And I think that's going to be huge for MLS too, if they can draw that, you know, 75,000, 74,000, I guess, crowd, and potentially more. So that'll be big. And then the next question will just be, okay, can it sustain? Can this team make the playoffs? And all the kind of technical questions. Can they lock down another DP?
Yeah, somewhat related. Like, I know Charlotte is a large sphere of influence between upstate South Carolina and North Carolina. Are they concentrating right now on just like the Charlotte region primarily for marketing? Are they looking to upstate South Carolina, trying to draw in like the Spartanville, Greenville area, or like going up towards Winston-Salem or Greensboro? Or are they really just concentrating right now on their core Charlotte area market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think from the get-go, this club has been branded pretty heavily as like a club for the Carolinas, even though it's named Charlotte FC. And, there's probably some political reasons for that, I'm guessing, as to why the name turned into that. But I think that certainly the efforts have not just been concentrated on Charlotte area, but on North and South Carolina as well, and getting them involved. Like I know, the club just announced kind of broadcast deals across the Carolinas. That includes South Carolina coverage on certain local stations. So that was a really big point for the club, was we want to make sure, people can still access it, and that they're going to have live streaming in zip codes that do extend further out beyond just the, close local Charlotte epicenter. And I think the supporters groups, like just in terms of kind of the fan support for it too, I know that the supporters groups have certainly span beyond just this region, although it's more heavily concentrated in Charlotte. But there are South Carolina supporters groups for Charlotte FC too. And, I think that's something that you could probably see grow a little bit more, is just, having the Raleigh area too so close is probably something that, we'll see how much that Charlotte FC and the marketing and branding for that is able to penetrate that already pretty soccer heavy Raleigh and Triangle area. So that will be something that's, I think, interesting to see just this first season, is like how many fans do kind of know about it and come down for matches from that Triangle region.
I'm hoping that don't call them the Railhawks and Charlotte FC meet in the Open Cup this year. I think that would be really fun. Get that first Carolina rivalry going in a proper tournament. Going back to the stadium, I know there were pretty significant renovations to make room for Charlotte FC. Is the NFL stadium the long-term plan, or is there any talk of a soccer specific ground for the team?
Yeah, that's been another kind of big question for us too, is, just very early into expansion process. Like just some plans in terms of academy and first team. We're moving around in different area. There was talk of building an academy specific center and training center in one area, and some of those plans changed. And then it was like, okay, is this going to be the long-term play then for Charlotte to move to a different spot? Are they going to have their own training ground and soccer specific stadium? Because there is actually a very nice American Legion Memorial Stadium, where your USL team plays here. It's a really nice soccer-specific stadium, but I think the ultimate goal was to be able to host, a 74,000 person match. And as far as I have heard, there's been no indication, at least from the front office or from MLS, about that moving. I asked Don Garber on a media call, not today, but much earlier. And he was asked again today, actually, if there was any plan. And that seems to be like the question that they keep getting too. Is Charlotte going to go to soccer specific? But the league's position has been that they're really comfortable with Charlotte playing in a non-soccer specific stadium. And I think we'll see, but I have not heard anything. Nothing has been indicated in terms of that moving, at least in the short term. So I think they've highlighted these renovations very much at Bank of America Stadium to make it more soccer friendly, and have spent a significant amount of money to do that, and time and resources. And it's not just, I guess, soccer, but they've got concerts and other events and stuff that they host there, other international soccer matches as well. But built out like a whole new player locker room. The supporter section is really large. And yeah, so as far, just concession stands, ticketing, the march, they've all kind of thought that through in terms of like, this is where we're going to be for the next year, couple years, future years. And then from there, it is an old stadium. It does have artificial turf now. So I think that's going to continue to be a question, though, is like, is there a long-term plan to build out a soccer-specific stadium for Charlotte? And I think a lot of it's going to depend on, too, just, like what the fan turnout is like.
Mm-hmm. So we always like to end these segments back on the field, specifically asking, how would you game plan against the team that you cover coming in? Little inside intel for this podcast, which obviously the technical staff of DC United listens to closely. So just to give aid to the enemy here, what are your thoughts?
That's it. No, I mean, I think that's a good question. And as I was saying earlier too, I think it's a tough one to answer just because of this very unique Miguel Angel Ramirez game model and system. But I think, I think you've got to press the attack, which I think, DC United is going to have some success with, just knowing how kind of hard it hits that attacking system. So yeah, I mean, I think that being able to get that kind of like, Charlotte FC likes to do these very quick passes, especially in the backfield. So if you're able to just press up high in the field and cut that pass off, I think you can net some goals that way, honestly. Like, catch them as they're far back in the field. They're working on the possession system. They've got some kind of fluidity issues still, I think, just being this team that's getting used to working together. And I think you could catch them off guard by just moving some of your guys forward and trying to cut off some of those rogue passes.
Well, that's good news, because that is the basis of Hernan Losada's maximum overdrive.
Yeah, I know. Right. That's what I'm saying is like, we'll see how it goes, right? Is like we'll see what the results look like early with the Charlotte FC team. The excitement is there. I'm a little bit doubtful that the results are going to be there immediately. That doesn't mean that they can't turn it around. It's a long season. You still got the summer transfer window, but
absolutely.
Yeah, we might have a lot of fans kind of cheering on draws would be a success, I think.
Well, if nothing else, you have a very, I won't say high bar, but 3 wooden spoons in a row for the last for another recent expansion team. Right. So no matter how badly you start this year, you don't have 3 wooden spoons on the trot.
You have a number of years to be worse than FC Cincinnati.
That's right. Yeah, and no shortage to talk. No shortage of topics to talk about, I guess, with this coach and these expectations. So, but it'll make it fun. It'll make it fun to follow.
Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you online?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. This is fun. You can find me on Twitter at Andrejev Alex, Andrejev is my last name. You can find all of our soccer coverage in the Charlotte Observer or the charlotteobserver.com/sports.
Find us at blackandredunited.com. Support us financially at patreon.com/filibuster. Our Patreon patrons did get early access to this episode, and we'll keep that going through the year when we can handle 2 episodes in a week, which I think this year will be a little bit easier than in the past or than last year, because we have a regular season that's more regular this year, which is nice. I'm looking forward to not having 8 games a week every week forever and ever. Anyway, find us on Twitter at blackandredu, at filibusterdcu, at Bromley Soccer, at Jason DC Soccer, at 202AMT. Send your emails to filibusterpodcast@gmail.com. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Download and subscribe, obviously. And then I'm told that ratings and reviews are also very helpful in that whole thing. Mostly, I like it when you tell a friend about the show. So tell them about this great interview in this preview of the Charlotte game that you heard. And we'd consider that a huge favor for us. So for Jason and Ben, and thanking Alex Andrejev one more time, I'm Adam. We'll talk at you again real soon. Easy for me to say. Say goodbye, Jason.
No,
I had a
I'm
dream that was
taking
only
this
about
over.
Persimmons.
Nope, I'm taking this over. Adam was wrong. I was right about the Charleston battle.
The tournament did stop though.
Doesn't matter. You were wrong.